Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All of you joining us from different parts. I believe most of you are from Ethiopia or other East African countries. My name is Samhar Okbazion. I'm your host today. And we're joined by Nazran Baba. Nazran, he will introduce himself to us a little bit later, but he and we worked together at American University back in the days. It's been quite some time now, but he was one of the great student workers in the office, and he has moved on to do some great work. And he will tell us more about what he does in a few minutes. And without any further ado, I will now turn the mic to Nazran, but I would like to welcome all of you who are joining. Welcome, and hopefully this will be worth your time. And today we'll talk about effective writing for college admission and scholarship applications. So hopefully you will learn a lot from Nazran. So Nazran, welcome again.
Thanks, Emma. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I would like to start asking you with a few questions, or do you have any presentations for us? Anything that you would like to present before?
Sure, I think I do. I just have a PowerPoint deck. Let me just pull it up.
Okay.
Let me know if you're seeing my screen.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay.
Not the slides though yet.
Not the slides, yep.
Yeah.
Okay, we need to move this out of there. And put this over here. And I'm sorry, I guess I need to switch this. Swap that. Okay. Are you seeing that okay?
Yes, we can see it now.
Okay, great. Do you want me to just start off with an introduction or?
Yeah, let's do that actually. Why don't I ask you my first question?
Sure.
And then that will help us to transition to your slides, and then depending on if you answer the questions, I may or may not ask you questions.
Yes.
So tell us about yourself, Nazran. Who are you? How did you come to the US? What did you study? Where? And what do you do now? And what's your business?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you know, my name is Nazran Baba, and I'm originally from Sri Lanka. I graduated from high school probably around, I want to say maybe 2009. And I applied to the US universities in 2009. Back in the time, we used to work with the US Fulbright Commission. They used to kind of give us some really good advice on how to apply to different universities in the US. And I did a model, which is a 3-step model, which is you apply to your dream schools, your middle schools, and then your safety schools. That was something I kind of did. So I did a lot of research on the types of universities that I wanted to apply to. And then you always kind of have to have your dream or your read schools, and then a safety middle, and then just some backups in case something, all of the universities kind of don't go your way. You always have something to kind of fall back on. And through that application process, I did probably about maybe like 9 or 10 applications, maybe close to 7 actually, now that I think about it. And I ended up at American University. It's in Washington, DC. And that's how I, of course, as you all might know, came to know Semha. So was able to kind of get a good scholarship from that application and start in 2009. I graduated in 2012 with a double major in economics and English literature. It's a very strange combination to have. Sometimes you think of economics as math, literature is like writing, and those two don't go together. But honestly, it's been a good experience. I think if you apply to universities in the US, that's one of the nice things about the system here, the education system here, is you don't have to declare a major as you get in, right? Compared to if you kind of go to Australia or the UK, you have to kind of know what you're getting into. I was very undecided when I came in as a student. So studying at American University and American universities in general kind of gives you that 2 years to really just figure out what you kind of like and then specialize later. So in my first 2 years, I was taking everything from philosophy, biology, sociology, um, mathematics, a bit of history, all of this different stuff. And then I kind of figured out I really enjoy literature. It's my passion. I like writing a lot. But also after college, I needed a job. So I kind of had that practical aspect too. And the university I went to, AU, and a lot of the universities over here allow you to do that. They allowed me to do a double major, so I could kind of do both of those. So I had my passion, and then I also had my practical major. So that's where economics and literature come in. And then right after graduation, Semha knows this, international students in the US, they're up against a few hurdles when it comes to kind of finding employment. And if you want to stay on in the US, you have to long term, you have to get sponsored if you don't have a green card or if you're not a citizen. So I had to think of ways I could navigate that career. So right after graduation, how it goes back in my time was you have to get a job within 90 days. So I ended up getting a job, and not my ideal job. I did it for about 2-3 weeks. It was a sales job, kind of related to direct marketing and consulting. And then while I had that job, I kind of applied to another job, and then I got into consulting. And how this consulting happened was I really liked consulting because consulting is basically someone hires you to solve problems, is basically what you think of when you think of consulting, because consulting can be very vague. So here we were doing consulting in the sense that it allowed me to kind of combine the ability to write with also the ability to analyze data. So what I particularly did was I joined a firm called ICF, and I became a federal consultant where we were helping the US government. So the Department of Defense, the US Navy, all these different agencies in the federal government, they all have projects that they put out to the private sector, and private sector firms bid on those. So I was part of a team that bid on some of these projects, and we won work, and we were helping basically the US government develop websites and web systems. So I kind of was there for about 8.5 years, where I started off as a research assistant, became an analyst, became an associate, then a senior associate. And just this year, a few months ago, I switched to another firm after 8.5 years with that firm. And I became a senior business analyst with another firm, Deloitte, who I'm contracting with another agency. So it's been an interesting journey from that project management side, because it's been allowed me to kind of combine that analytical framework with a bit of writing. But then on the side where this whole writing aspect comes from is from back in the day, people would always kind of come to me to kind of get help on like a second opinion on a college essay, or they needed help with a statement or an email or some kind of writing. And I would do it just as, just on the free whenever I had time. Over the last 2 years, I've been thinking, you know what, there's actually something more to this. A lot of people who are not directly in my network may also find this kind of support useful. So I started putting myself out there, and that's how this whole Your Writer came about. It's basically, it's my professional service. I do it under my name. So it's Your Writer by Nazran Baba. And it's just a professional service that I offer to anyone, any clients who kind of seek help. They could have they're not happy in their job and they want a new resume and they don't know how to do it, or they don't have the time, or they need to update their LinkedIn profile if it's not good, or they're applying to college or university for scholarships like y'all, and they just need someone to kind of look over their writing and give them advice. And that's kind of something, it's my passion. I thrive in that. So that's where that kind of pitch came up. So Sam, I know that was a lot, probably more than you asked for, but let me know if I missed anything or if you want me to elaborate on any specific points there.
That was good. That was good. And I was sharing, both ICF and Deloitte's website for the students. If you are curious to know what these organizations do, you can feel free to check them out. And I'm going to share your website as well.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you.
Yourwriter.com, right?
Yes, that's right. It's your-writer.com.
That's right, right. Yeah.
And on my next slide, I think I just have the details. I can just keep that on after we're done with that.
Okay. Yeah, you can keep going on, and I think
Sure.
after the presentation, I'll ask if you have any more questions at that point.
Okay. Let me see if I had any other, Sim, anything specific you wanted? Did you have another question, or did you want me to just touch
Okay.
base on something specific there?
Okay, so I think I can go and ask the second question, I
Yep,
guess.
sure.
Yeah. So my second question to you was, what's your advice for international students when it comes to CV or resume writing? And if you can also elaborate a little bit, what's the difference between CV and resume? What's a good CV or resume like? What are the most important elements of it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And I think there's so much to unpack there. And I think that's a question we often get a lot. A lot of folks kind of mix them both up. They think it's the same thing. Honestly, sometimes you can use it interchangeably. If you want to get technical, there is a big difference between CV and resume. So how I like to think of it is, and it can vary across different countries, right? For example, in Sri Lanka, where I'm originally from, people tend to use CV more than resume. And over here in the US, people tend to use resume more than CV. The main distinction is the CV is it doesn't have a page length per se, it can be longer. So 4 or 5 pages on a CV is not something that kind of turns a recruiter off. That's kind of expected. The other aspect of it is a CV is meant to be more academic. So it's kind of meant to show your whole career history as a part of like a portfolio. So in the US, for example, CVs are meant for more kind of like research-based positions. You know, if you're a professor, you'll probably have a CV because you want to kind of show the length and breadth of your research, of your publications, the different positions you've had. So that's kind of one of the main distinctions between CV and resume. A resume, on the other hand, is more targeted towards the job or the jobs that you're applying to. Typically, they tend to be 1 to 2 pages max. Another common question we get a lot from your writer is, should my resume be a 1 page resume or should it be a 2 page resume? Always get that. I'm so happy I went down this path to kind of find out this answer. The real answer is there is no 1 page resume rule. You do not have to have only 1 page for a resume. You can have a good 2 page resume. That is fine. Unless, for example, some companies or some industries have a specific requirement for 1 page, it's okay to have 2 pages. But I say that with caution in the sense that you want to target your resume to reflect your experience, right? You don't want to just put stuff on there just for it to kind of be a 2 page resume. If you feel like you can fit everything in a page and you're doing it justice, then a 1 page is fine. If you feel like you have a bit more experience that is not able to cram it in a single page, having 2 pages is not going to kind of deter you or kind of put you at a disadvantage. Honestly, when we speak to recruiters, and what I've heard from the recruitment community is that they would rather have someone who has articulately, comprehensively communicated all of their skills on 2 pages than to kind of have something that's kind of half-baked. So that's another thing I'd like to put out there, that the 1 page versus the 2 page resume. Sema, could you remind me of some of the other questions you had? I know you had a lot packed in there.
Sure, sure. So I said, generally speaking, what's a good resume, and what are the most important elements of it, or the qualities of a good resume?
Yeah, that's a great question. What's a good resume? Something we also do is, when you look at a resume, the visual aspect of it, think of it as like white space versus black space. Um, when you see a lot of text on a resume visually, the recruiter or the person reviewing it feels less likely to kind of, you don't want to intimidate them with a lot of text. So you do want to be concise in your writing, and you also want to format your resume in such a way that it balances it out nicely so that, it's not too cramped in one section. It feels very uniform. I think about visual white space as a way to kind of format your resume. Should you get fancy with your graphics and your formats? Not necessarily. I think that really depends on industry. simplest, sometimes being simple and less is more is always the good way to go. You don't want to have too much graphics and too many things jumping out, different kinds of fonts, different kinds of colors popping out. Now, there are rules, right, that depend on industry. So say, for example, you're a creative, you're a graphic designer, and you have a portfolio of creative products. That kind of resume can be very different than someone who's applying, for university, or someone who's applying for a job in finance or accounting. Those kind of resumes can look very different than an architect or an interior designer or an interior decorator. So you can have creativity depending on the industry. But that's not to say, you can't have any creativity at all. I would rather err on the side of caution in terms of ensuring that when a recruiter sees this, it's something that they expect, not something that was totally out of the wheelhouse. So think about what makes a good resume is that it should conform to what the recruiter is kind of comfortable with, while also having its own unique elements. So other aspects of a good resume is definitely articulate all of your achievements, your topmost achievements. It should be chronological. The ones that you've done most recently should always be highlighted, and it should kind of be in a logical order that they can kind of go through a timeline and see, okay, this is this person's career progression, or this is this person's academic achievements through their timelines. So that should be another aspect. Another good aspect that we've kind of seen more over the last recent 5-10 years is the executive summary. Should you have one, should you not? Again, totally up to you. But a lot of the newer resumes kind of tend to have an executive summary. When I do resumes for clients, I like to do that executive summary because it really gives a quick encapsulation or quick impact for the recruiter on who this person is, what do they do. Now, your next question is, what should a good executive summary have, right? I think at a high level, it should mention things like what kind of professional you are, like a senior finance analyst. How many years of experience do you have? Senior finance analyst with 10 years of experience. And then in that executive summary, you should mention 2 or 3 of your strongest strengths that you want them to know, and then also about your skills. So if you just do who you are, how many years of experience, what are your strongest strengths, your passions, and then your skills, in a very short paragraph. This should be about maximum 3 to 5 sentences. It should not be blocky. It should be right at the top. That's just going to have a big impact for someone who is going through, 20, 30 resumes a day, and they just quickly see this and they know from that itself, they get a sense or flavor of who you are. I think definitely consider having an executive summary in your resume if you don't have that. What else makes a good resume? Obviously, you
Can
want
I
to.
interrupt you here?
Yep,
What's the
go ahead.
difference between executive summary and objective? Because most of the time, student resumes or students who are applying for admission or scholarship, they put an objective. So can you tell us the difference between executive summaries? It sounds like more for people who've been working for quite some time.
Yeah, no, that's a good decision. So actually, I think an objective statement is a bit more narrower than an executive summary. Sometimes executive summaries can have objective statements within them. So sometimes when we do it for clients, we actually put that objective sentence, that objective statement sentence at the end, saying, I'm this kind of person, blah, 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 and I'm looking for XYZ. So that kind of can be the objective. What you mean by objective is, what is the mission of this resume? Like, what are you trying to do? Are you looking to work in public policy covering the Middle East? Are you looking to help the federal government with projects? Like, what is your passion? That kind of can bleed into the executive summary. They're not two distinct things, but I know what you mean. Sometimes they'll kind of, sometimes I've seen resumes where they don't have the executive summary, but they just have the objective statement. So that's just what their mission is to success from that resume is what that is. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yep. And I think the final thing I'd say is obviously proofreading the resume, making sure grammar is correct, syntax is correct, writing is concise, the quality of the writing is important. Last thing you need is, for the recruiter to be distracted by something on the resume that, sometimes, you're working on these things late at night. You need someone else to just kind of have a good second pair of eyes to kind of review all of that, because it would be doing you an injustice, right? Say, for example, you have everything in line, very good, strong profile. And if there's a typo or if there's some kind of small grammatical error, that recruiter is going to remember that. And that's really unfortunate because you are an A class student And if that was something that was just a kind of a mistake, I think always take the time to kind of proofread, make sure everything is right. When we do resumes for clients, we like to keep a bit of lead time, because after we've done the editing, I like to have, and I have some writers as well, we like to give them 24 hours of like a break, so that they can come back to that final edit on that resume with a new fresh pair of eyes. So because when you keep editing heavily, and if you're going to university, you're going to know this, you develop something called tunnel vision, which is
Mhm.
basically where you've been reading and writing the same thing for the past few hours, and by the time it's the end of the night, you cannot concentrate and you do not see those errors anymore, because you've seen the same thing again and again. You really need to take a break, at least 24 hours, and come back to it, and you're going to have a whole new perspective, a fresh pair of eyes to kind of do that final check. So that's very important when you finalize your resumes.
Yeah, and I cannot stress enough, particularly for students who are applying for admission. Let's say you're applying for a master's degree program, and everything you say and you have done is good, but when it comes to like the typos, the errors, grammatical or other errors, if they're all over the place, then it can turn off the admission person. It can
Yep.
turn off the scholarship,
Yep.
review committee. So it's very, very important for you to review
Yep. Yep.
before
And
you.
it's very unfortunate because it's such a minor thing, could have been fixed, but person can be a great candidate, but this kind of thing happens, and you just want to kind of remove that from your equation for success, right? Yep.
Yeah, that's correct. So I think my third question is kind of related, and we've touched upon it a little bit, but if you can just speak to it from the perspective of storytelling, or how to portray yourself, your achievements, what you've done in the past. Most of the students who are tuning in right now are, Eritrean students. They're mostly in refugee status in Ethiopia or other East African countries. Some of the frequent question that I get is, there's been a gap in our resume. How do we fill the gap? Like, how do we tell our story? Because yes, these students may be in a refugee status in a very unique situation, but they have been doing great things, in Eritrea, but for one reason or another, they have left their home country, and now they find themselves in limbo, and they want to market themselves to universities and, different scholarship agencies, institutions. So how could they use these documents, whether it's the resume or the statement of purpose, to tell their stories, to tell their challenge, their unique background? So if you could talk a little bit about that. I know from the US perspective, we say, highlight the numbers, highlight your achievements, highlight, what you've been doing. But, on the flip side of it, when you're talking to these vulnerable students, how do they bring their resume up to, the level of the US standard, but also highlighting the different challenges that they face. But at the same time, they are qualified and they are eligible for the admission or the scholarship application. I know I asked a long question, but if you,
Yeah.
whatever comes to your mind, if you can share with us, that would be great.
Yeah, no, that's a very good question as well. I think one of the biggest things is, if you're an international student or prospective international student, you come with languages, right? Different languages. You have cultural competencies that some of the traditional US students might not have. So with that, you come with a whole range of perspectives. So I think that speaks to competencies or skill sets like, cross-cultural communication. There's so many different ways to pitch that. We also talk about resilience, right? If you've been through some form of adversity and you're able to overcome that, that is a good key success factor for the future, right? If you can communicate that, saying you've been through this and you've still overcome. I mean, you're putting pen to paper and you're applying for this and you have your results to show it, whether it's academic or whatnot. That overcoming of the obstacle itself will also put you in good position to kind of be successful in the universities, be successful in the workplace. I mean, those are strengths sometimes we don't recognize, because we're always thinking of like, oh, what are we lacking? How do we kind of make up? When in actuality, by overcoming those obstacles, we ourselves have developed certain core strengths that other folks might not have. So those are ways to kind of uniquely distinguish yourself on paper, so that the recruiter or the admissions person can kind of see. So I think another good exercise to do is take a moment to just do a full reflection, take a blank piece of paper, take a notepad, notes on your iPhone, whatever you want, a blank canvas, and just think about the last few, maybe last 10 years. What have you done? Like start listing out every single thing you've done, everything you've achieved. Sometimes we don't even realize what we've done until we do this exercise. So I always say, take a moment to just, even more than a moment, take an hour, take a half a day, just go through everything you've done. And then once you have that list, you can start either categorizing it into possible sections that can inform your personal statement, or you can kind of understand by looking at that list, okay, this is what everything I've been through, and these are some things that might be interesting for someone else to know. So when you have that full list, you're going to get the immediate bullet points for things like your resume, things like the points that come into a personal statement, the cover letter, all of those things live in that list, right? But sometimes we don't have access to that list because we haven't taken the time to actually generate it. So that's where take that mental exercise, take some time to kind of go through everything you've actually done. Because sometimes what happens most of the time is we suddenly see a requirement that, oh, we have to write a personal statement, we have to do a resume, and you have to do it like within a short time frame, and you think very surface level, you don't dig deep. So if you proactively dig deep, you're going to excavate all of these good nuggets that you can actually put into your application. So I think that is one key method to kind of pay attention to. The other thing, a very good probe that I heard is gaps. How do you explain gaps in your resume? This is something very common that we get. It's not just this, like sometimes we have clients who, say they get pregnant and they're out for like about 1 or 2 years. How do they explain that on their resume? There's different ways to do this. Um, the best way that I can think of, and it really depends on each situation, I think sometimes there are formats that you can use on a resume to explain a gap. You can actually specify it. At other times, sometimes we advise, you don't need to mention it unless it's actually probed in. So one of the best ways to kind of overcome that is just to make sure everything else makes sense. If all of your other aspects, as long as you make the other job roles and whatever you've done experience kind of glow up more, they're not going to be so in tune to kind of find those gaps. If they do find the gaps, and if it comes up in an interview or in a follow-up question, that's totally fine. You shouldn't be avoiding it. You can actually explain this is exactly what happened, and this is where you see an advantage that you recognize that this is a gap that you have, and you kind of want to make future amends to kind of get new experiences, or kind of work even harder for a certain reason. You want to be transparent about that when they probe it. You don't want to deny it. You don't want to shy away from it. You don't want to be embarrassed by it. That's not something you want to kind of give out. But there's kind of a few ways you can address the gaps. Don't be scared of the gaps. Don't be afraid of the gaps. And I think the most important thing is, if you have a gap, do not let that demotivate you. There are ways to overcome that, because a lot of people, what we sometimes see is, they have a gap and they're like, oh God, they're going to see this gap in my resume and I'm not going to get anything. I can't do this, I can't do that. No, what you should be doing is talking about everything you have done until that point. And then if they have a question about it, just answer it, whether you took a gap year, and you may have taken a gap year to give you a break. If you got pregnant, you spent time to create a family, and that in and of its own is an experience, right? I mean, there's so many competencies that come right now in the workplace. There's a lot of flexibility and responsiveness to that kind of occurrence. So you need to be able to communicate that. You shouldn't shy away from that. You should be able to take that head on. And you can do that in a few ways in the resume, or you can kind of leave it and let them either figure it out and follow up on you. But that's a personal choice. I can't advise on how to address the gap. It really depends on what you're comfortable with and what strategy you're going to take on that.
Thank you so much, Nazran. That was a really good answer. And I'm sure the students could, figure out how to apply that in their personal particular situation. Now, I don't want to keep you talking without giving the students a chance to ask you a few questions. So briefly, what can you tell us about your business? And if any student or other people want to get in touch with you, perfect. So can you tell us about the different, services that you provide?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So what I've started is something called, it's pretty simple. It's called yourwriter.com. It's basically a portfolio page that allows you to kind of go in there, find out what we do, who I am, and what other kind of different services we offer. And if anyone needs help they're more than welcome to kind of reach out to us. We also do something called a complimentary resume review, where anyone can just submit their resume to us and we will give you feedback on it without any charge. That's not something we charge for. So we'll have someone go through it, probably me, and kind of give you feedback on this is what's missing, this is what you can do, etc., to kind of be constructive. And then it's on the code, it's on the ball code of that client to either think if they're going to implement it on their own, or if they need help, they can reach out to us and we can show them templates. I can just quickly show you our website if
Yeah, I was gonna ask
something.
you to do that. Yeah,
Yeah,
because you have some really good illustrations.
yeah. Let me put it up. Let's see if I can get it up. Yep. So if you go to the website, you'll just find the homepage and all of the stuff. If you go here, you'll just find the different services we do, what that process is. And if you want a free resume or like a career assessment, you can just click this button and submit a request to us, and then we'll get in touch with you. Then we also have the services, and also on here we have the samples. So sometimes people don't have time, or sometimes they're not sure how to update a resume or what kind of resume you're looking for. So in the samples page, we have, these are real resumes we've done for clients. What the clients do is they update their most current resume, and it might not look pretty, or they might want a new refresh on their format. So we have different types of resume formats that we have, and they can select one of these, and then our writers will just go ahead and put everything they have into this format. We'll have a 30-minute interview with the person to understand what are they looking for in the job, is it a university, who are they trying to get. And then once we get all of those, we call it requirement gathering. So we gather all the requirements, and then we craft the resume on behalf of the client, and then we'll give them a mock-up like this, a draft. They can review that, give us feedback, and then we'll edit it, and then we finalize that. So that's one of the other, these are the most popular samples or templates that we have. And we have identified, there are different, remember how I said before, if you're creative, you're going to have a very different resume than someone who's going into accounting, right? So over here, we did this resume on the left called Prim. This was for an interior designer. So you're going to see it's very different compared to someone who is a lawyer, who had, let me see this one over here. This one is like a lawyer over here. So it's a very different format compared to the more basic graduates who are coming right out of school. These are the more traditional ones that I'm talking about. These are the safest ways to go, because they kind of, meet the kind of general expectation of what a resume is. And then within that bucket, there were other things, right? Like if you're a US federal employee and you want a federal resume, we have that as well. So there's different kind of categories that we have that we classify, and that will kind of get once we have that interview with the client, and they'll tell us, what are they applying for, what do they need. So I just wanted to show you all that just to kind of get a sense of what that looks like.
Perfect. This is good. So if anyone has any questions at this point, I'm gonna open it for Q&A. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to raise your hand, or shout, on the chat box, or let us know in whatever way works for you. Okay. So anyone has any questions about resumes? I see 13, so I think 12 people. Okay, I guess you have answered all of their questions.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Well,
And I always say, don't get uncomfortable with the silence, even if you need to take a moment to just think about what your question is and you want us to be on. We can definitely kind of be that kind of support, so don't feel rushed or anything. And even if
Samuel just texted here and he said it's all clear, thank you.
that's
That's wonderful. Yeah, I mean, Nazran has impressed me with everything that he's working on, and I'm gonna ask him to rewrite my resume because I'm tired of looking at my resume. I wrote it, I rewrote it, I've improved it so many times. Now I need a fresh set of eyes to just look at it, organize it in a nice way. So, that's how much I trust him.
Oh,
And
thank you.
if you guys, need some help, like he said, he has some free, he can review your resumes for free and give you feedback. So you will have the responsibility of rewriting it will be yours, but he's making himself available to review your resume and give you feedback. So take that to heart. I think Heran is, he's raising his hand. Heran, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Heran?
Well, I just want to thank him, and yeah, that's it. I just want to thank him.
Okay.
And it's all clear, yeah.
Okay. Where are you, Heran? Are you in Ethiopia or other places?
Yeah, I'm in Ethiopia, Addis Ababa.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Heran.
You're welcome.
Moses, go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Okay, thank you so much, Samar. I would like to thank Nazran so much for your very educational information about the CV, resume, and SOP. Thank you so much. I really found it to be very helpful. I also
Great.
thank Samar. Yeah, I also thank you so much, Samar, for creating this opportunity. My question is about writing SOP. For example, if your cumulative GPA that you finished in college is below 2.75 or 3 point, but you have a very good experience in the work environment, say like for over 5 years or with good experience in a good companies, but still your cumulative GPA is below 2.75. How can you address this low GPA when you're applying for a master's degree? Let's say if you have any problems while you were learning in college, can you address it in a good way that the evaluators that can understand? Thank you so much.
Yep, that's a great question. Now,
Thank
Moses, let me ask you a follow-up to that. Does the program that you're applying to have a minimum requirement? And are you meeting or not meeting that? Or are you talking about like for scholarships, it doesn't matter, like you just want to kind of highlight that. Can you tell me a bit about that?
Yeah, I'm talking about with the scholarships that have minimum requirement.
Okay.
Most of the scholarship opportunities, they put a minimum GPA of 3. So I am addressing for such kind of issues.
Yep. No, that's a good point. I think the main thing to advise there is, like you said, if your work experience is stellar, if it's really good, I will focus mostly on that to kind of ensure that you've done extraordinary things in your work experience to really make that glow up, I would say.
Okay.
So that they don't really focus on this aspect. Now, if they're going on a programmatic way and they kind of disqualify you because you haven't met that, then that's something you couldn't have helped it, right? That is their requirement, their department, they have their rules, and they need to have a minimum this thing. But what you can do is in that writing, you can kind of, you don't have to mention that as much, but make everything else just be really striking. Make sure if it's specific work experience, be specific about it. Like, what have you done that has really transformed either your supervisor, your people you work with, your products that you've developed? Be very specific, be concrete, because that is going to paint the picture in their mind. Don't just say, I've done high quality work and done X products. Say, what did you do? How did you do it? How did that have an impact on someone else? Did that increase the bottom line? Did that increase profit revenue for someone else? Did you get customer feedback on that? Are there reviews? Like those kind of, that's where we talk about volume and value, 2 V's. Always talk about be specific and show what was the outcome of that. How did that, like one of the common things when I comb a resume, I always look for numbers. People don't have numbers as much. They say, did quality service for H&M, but wouldn't it be way more effective if you said helped 100 plus customers a day with sales and customer questions, and just be very specific. That just transforms everything you did, as opposed to I provide customer service, as opposed to I help more than 100 people a day in a fast-paced work environment, and I help grow the profit of the company because you generated sales, right, by those interactions. So that kind of value is what you want to put in your resume. So think of what you've done, but also think about that next step. So what is that next step linkage? Once you start putting things like that, that's what's going to impress those reviewers and recruiters when they see that specificity.
Okay, thank you so much. I gained very valuable information, especially when you said the volume and value of your
work. Volume and value. Just remember those, because that's the way to go. A lot of the resumes are missing data. If you do reports, right? They say report writing. But how many reports do you do a year? Like, is it 12, 10 month? Is it daily, weekly? Like, you put those numbers in, when you put numbers, it's volume, and then it creates value for that reader.
Thank you so much. One more question in relation to that. How about mentioning in a slight way the problem that made you to have not so great GPA? For example, if you have some economical issues or family issues, such as illness in the middle of your educational process, is it advisable to mention it in a slight way or not advisable?
Great question. A really great question. I think I hate this answer, but it really depends, right? It depends on the audience that you're writing to. If you're applying, like I can say from experience, for like a US university, if you're applying to a US university, some of those personal statements and application essays can be a bit more informal than some of the other. Now, again, it depends on the program, depends on what program you're applying to. But sometimes in these application essays, you're able to explain your story. And if it's that type of application where you can be a bit more, honest about your particular story, that's going to really resonate. So say, for example, you have a low GPA. You recognize that the low GPA is, but what have you done to address that? This is XYZ what I've taken. I've taken classes, I've taken this, I've taken that. I'm making an active effort. So that kind of shows, okay, you recognize that you have this downfall, but you're overcoming that. The other aspect of it is also sometimes when you write the adversity and you do have that economic impact, that you're kind of struggling economically, some reviewers actually appreciate that, because then they can put you into a different bucket. Again, it depends, because say, for example, if you're applying to Harvard or Yale or something, they have these things called need blind, right? They don't care about your need. What they care about is, are you competent? Are you able to succeed in this program? Do you have the skill set? Whether you can pay or not, we don't worry about. We'll take care of that. So when you have programs like that, you can be really honest about what your situation is and the adversity you've overcome. They're just going to be focused on you as an individual and your potential, not your economic standing right now. So that's why I say it depends. Some of the programs you can be a bit more targeted, some you cannot. But I think the best thing for you to do is research the programs that you're applying to. Have there been other people who have done something similar and they've kind of come out on the top? So then when you know a bit more about that, you can really use that to your advantage, because some of these programs, like for example, actually in my case, I know when I was applying to AU, long time after, when I was looking at some stuff that I found, they had taken into consideration like my economic standing as well. And then they said, this person is coming in, we're not sure if they can afford it, we need to give them a scholarship. But I don't know how that came in, but maybe that came in through the reviews of certain stuff or the essay or something. But see, someone in the background recognized that and they made an active effort to do that. Again, it really depends on the program. As much as you can know about them, speak to people at the university, speak to the, if you can get in touch with the staff over there, kind of understand that, that's going to really help you, because the more you know, the more informed, and then you can be more targeted. But some programs are different. So that's a bit difficult. That's why I say it depends. You have to really kind of do that investigation.
Yes, thank you so much, Nazran. It depends on the program to involve your story or not.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So those were like very, very good points, Nazran. Number, volume, and what's the other thing you said? Value.
Yeah, volume and
Value.
value. Yeah. I just made that up right now, so I'm just going to use that for the future.
Sounds like it's already been a coined, thing.
Yeah.
Volume and value. Even in the US market, like when you're applying for jobs, you have to have numbers on your resume. Otherwise, how are they going to know, like, how are they going to quantify the amount of impact you have in your job? So make sure, I know, in our culture, we don't like to talk about ourselves. We're not boastful people as
So true.
trained people.
Yep.
But talking about yourself and putting numbers, or emphasizing the role that you played in your jobs back home is very, very critical for you, because that's it's everything that you did happened far away. For them to understand it, you have to tell them, oh, this is what I did in Ministry of X, Y, and Z, and I helped this many people, I solved this many problems. So talk about numbers. And the other thing you mentioned, talking about personal issues and the statement of resume, it requires some research, definitely. So any other questions?
Sam, I think there were some questions on the chat. I'm not sure if we covered those or not.
Yeah, I see a few things there. And Esrom asked, how do I write a strong CV if I don't have much experience?
That's good. That's a good question. I think everyone has experience, to be honest. It's just a matter of thinking about it and writing it out. That's why I said, take that exercise to just sit down, take a couple of hours and think about what you've done. If you have no work experience at all, if you're just starting off, what did you do in school? Did you join clubs and societies? What kind of classes did you take? All of those can be translated into bullets on a resume, right? I think what might be the real question here is, do you feel that your experience is good enough compared to what you think others have, or parallel candidates or something like that? If that is really the question here, then you just cut that out. You need to focus on your profile, your experience, and just really write that out. If you start shining that, I think it'll be fine, because there's so many ways. Even if you don't have a job, you can go volunteer at like a free organization, do an internship, get experience, build that out, and really communicate that. Simple things like community service projects can translate. Really, one of the things I like about this thing I do is, like, it's all about marketing, right? If you take your personal profile and your resume is a marketing document, if you have the right words and the ways to string a sentence, you can make anything sound like anything. Not to be disingenuous, like, we're not faking it, right? But what we are doing is we're taking what you've done and they're just being very concrete, specific, and communicating it in such a way that it creates impact. Say, for example, you volunteered for like a malaria or like a AIDS or like a cancer drive, a project. That's just you going and volunteering there. But if you write it on your resume, you could say things like communication, cross-functional teams you work with IT department, you went and volunteered, project management, project coordination. All these keywords will come up in those kind of experiences. All that you need to do is just find those and kind of string them together. So any experience, you can really add value if you just communicate it properly. You just need to think about it. So don't kind of downplay that or put that down. Sometimes you have more value than you think you do. You just need to kind of communicate that.
And also the other thing to mention is, when you're applying, particularly for schools or scholarship programs, they tell you what they stand for, what the school stands for, like, their main core values, their mission, their vision, their values, their guiding principles, whatever they call it, on their website. So spend some time to learn more about the degree program, the school, what they're planning to achieve, and borrow some of the language from their website and make it your own and put it in your resume or statement of purpose so you can relate to them. If there's no correlation to what you've been doing and what they're trying to achieve, or you're not doing such a good job of explaining all of that in your documents, you're not going to stand out. But for you to stand out, you have to spend enough time learning about the institution, learning about the program itself, and learning about the leadership, just browse the website. There's so much you can glean from their website, and that can also help you to build your resumes, your statement of purpose, or essays, whatever you're writing about. I think that there was one question from Awad. I don't want to ignore that. He is, I think you kind of answered that, but I just wanted to briefly mention it to see if there's anything you want to add to it, Nazran. And Awad says, could you please be specific about the ways to represent the gaps in the resume, especially if there is no chance of follow-up questions or interview? Is it possible to express it in the statement of purpose? So I think you kind of answered it, but is there anything else you want to add?
No, yeah, I think we kind of covered that, but I think in general, it's really, it's kind of like, I want to say risk tolerance. It's really what you have the tolerance for. You can specifically mention it on your resume. If you want to, you can just, there are templates online that you can Google and see how do I explain a gap in my resume. Some people do it, some people don't. Do you want to, I don't think you want to draw attention to it unless you're doing it intentionally to make it a strength. Like, what I mean by that is, say, you can say something like, I have from May 2020 to 2021, I took blah, blah, blah off to blah, 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 blah. So you're explaining that, but you're saying, I did this for this specific reason. And it's kind of become like an advantage where you're kind of looking to the future. So you always want to spin those things positively. You don't want to draw negatively, being like, hey, I have this gap in my resume. I just want you to know that. That's not going to help you. What's going to help you is, hey, I have this gap in my resume, but I did this and this and this for this reason, and I plan to do X, Y, Z. So you're kind of drawing attention, but you're cutting it off and then putting a positive. You don't want to just draw attention to it and just keep it lingering like a negative. That's what you want to do there.
Yeah, that's a good point, Nazran. Thank you so much.
Sure.
That's a good strategy for you to use, if you want to talk about it. Bring it up, make it short and take it to a positive direction, and then just conclude it right there.
Yeah, and I always say don't bring it up unless you have to. And if you have to, then make it positive, right? Yeah, that's what you want to do. Yeah.
Yeah, with that, it's already 4:02. We've taken a good hour of your time. Thank you so much, Nazran. We appreciate you.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for having me.
If there's any final words you want to say, you want to share words of wisdom, because I know you've been an international student yourself. I'm going to give you a couple minutes, and then with that, we're going to wrap up.
Yeah, no, honestly, I think all of y'all are pretty well equipped for this. Don't kind of doubt yourselves. Honestly, you're coming with a lot of different skill sets, like I mentioned, language skills, the ability to deal with different culture, multicultural backgrounds. All of these are things that you can use to your advantage in your application. So kind of really make that shine. I think that's just going to help.
With that, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. I am sure that you've learned a few things, if not more, from Nazran, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon, evening, wherever you are. And until next time, so long. Thank you so much, Nazran.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
The rest of your afternoon.
You too. You always have a good night.
Thank you so much, Nazran. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a blessed night.
Thank
Blessed
you,
day.
Mr. Nazran.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.